shine the light of truth in a dark world. And thanks for your service, Michael.
All right, I appreciate that, Edward.
You take care.
Right.
Bye bye.
Well, let's go to Gene from Texas. Gene, come on up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Mike, and I will give you a call Monday.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
That Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly was with Naval Intelligence, according to this Men Who Killed Kennedy on the History Channel, and there's and he was maybe even working with Naval Intelligence, maybe the CIA, who knows, or FBI, involving this gun running. And there was a dancer at Jack Ruby's club they interviewed, and she said that one night that she and some other dancers there were introduced to Lee Harvey Oswald there at the club with Jack Ruby. Now, he could have been spying on Jack Ruby's gun-running activities.
Absolutely. I think that's a good possibility. I think that's a very good possibility.
One of the dancers ended up murdered, as did a lot of people that were involved in this. In fact, Sergeant Roger Craig that I talked about yesterday, that said that they found a German Mauser rifle, not Lee Harvey Oswald's Italian Carcano in the 6th-floor book depository building. He said he saw Lee Harvey Oswald standing at the door of the book depository building when the shots were fired. He was found dead in his home with in the mid-'70s with a shotgun to his stomach. They ruled it a suicide, yet Roger Craig never owned a shotgun. Kind of difficult. It's kind of difficult to kill yourself with a shotgun if you ever tried doing that. I mean, not you ever tried, but if anybody just not try literally, but just you can imagine with a shotgun. That's not the way to commit suicide.
Well, that's kind of funny because that's how Katharine Graham's husband, Philip Graham, supposedly suicided himself just at the time when he was getting ready to change his will and give all his shares in the Washington Post Company to his mistress and take it out of the hands of the Meyer-Graham family, or of the Meyer family. He married into the Meyer family, and old man Meyer liked Phil Graham so much he gave him the newspaper rather than his daughter, and then he was going to change his will, and suddenly Mr. Graham blew his brains out with a shotgun, and it's kind of interesting. They explained that away by saying that he had long arms.
Well, was Katharine Graham his wife?
Yes. Yeah, she was the daughter of Mr. Meyer, the Zionist war profiteer, who was also, his family was intermarried with the Levi Strauss fortune, which is one of the big Zionist fortunes here in the United States. And his timely demise prevented the Washington Post from slipping out of their hands.
Also, you mentioned Penn Jones, Midlothian, which is right down the road from here in Fort Worth here. And I used to listen to Penn Jones back on in the infancy of talk radio back in the late 60s and early 70s. And he was on mainly a station in the Dallas, Fort Worth area, the Lou Staples program.
I've heard of that, yeah.
Yes, and Lou Staples was also found murdered in a field outside Oklahoma City. And so, he had Penn Jones on his program a lot talking about the conspiracy. And this is back, like I say, in the late 60s, early 70s. So, it's been very dangerous to get too close to the truth of the JFK assassination.
Well, you mentioned naval intelligence, and I'm going to mention something here in the program I've never mentioned publicly before. My grandfather died in 1948. He was very young. He died very strangely. He died in a hotel room in Philadelphia. Now, the ostensible cause of his death was a heart attack, but we know what can be done with heart attacks. Why it's very interesting to me is that when my grandfather died, he was working for naval intelligence out of the Pentagon. And he had been involved in intelligence work in various capacities throughout his career. He had started out as a young, very successful railroad executive, come from a long line of railroad people. But then he got into intelligence. And I've often wondered about his death and precisely what he was doing, and the fact that, you know, in my mind, you know, since I'm become so focused on this issue of Israel and have become so aware of the fact that there was so much smuggling of arms to Israel in 1948, that I'm often wondering, I mean, this is just, you know, I've just wondered if my grandfather was not actually looking into that on behalf of naval intelligence, because he was in Philadelphia because that's where a major naval yard was, as you know, or may know. And like I say, this has been something that has bothered me for a long, long time because, well, it's very personal. Of course, I didn't know my grandfather, but I know what his point of view was, and I know that if he were in naval intelligence, he would not have been working on behalf of smuggling arms to Israel. He would have been working to stop it. So I'm just passing that on. That's one of those funny little things for whatever it's worth.
Well, a lot of weaponry was smuggled to the nominal Jews trying to defeat the Palestinians in 1948.
Yes, I mean, he would have been right in the midst of it, you see.
Well, there were a lot of arms being smuggled even before 1948 in the early 40s with the Irgun and the Stern gangs run by Menachem Begin.
And I'll tell you what, as I pointed out here in the show the other night, one of the primary smuggling points of all places was Galveston, Texas. Galveston, Texas. In fact, Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard spent some time in Galveston, and that's where he got energized to support the Zionist cause, because he saw all of the what he considered great work by the Zionist smugglers and so forth, smuggling weapons out of Texas. So there's a story in and of itself.
Penn Jones died just recently, a few years ago, and of course Lou Staples, in the infancy of talk radio back then, was the one found murdered. So, you know, I mean, you know, Joe Garagiola, the baseball catcher, in 1993. He was on NBC Today show, and they were showing all the people that had died that had some kind of connection to the JFK assassination, witnesses or whatever. And he said this has to be a conspiracy. He said, no way are all these people going to die, you know, that had some kind of links to the JFK assassination. And so even he could see that, of course. And why can't the federal government people see this?
Well,
I think they do. They just don't want to admit the truth.
I was going to say, I think your question was more rhetorical than a call for an answer, because the answer is implicit.
You know, and Gerald Ford was rewarded, of course, being vice president of the presidency for being on the Warren Commission. And
well, let me tell you something about Gerald Ford. This is kind of interesting. You bring him up. You know, Gerald Ford's top handler, his money man behind the scenes, was a guy named Max Fisher. Well, Max Fisher was tied directly into these Israeli interests that were involved in this shadowy operation known as Permindex that linked the Bronfman family to Clay Shaw of New Orleans. So, and the top lawyer on the Warren Commission, Albert Jenner. Everybody always focuses on Arlen Specter, but Albert Jenner of the Warren Commission legal staff was the personal attorney of Henry Crown, this organized crime-linked figure in Chicago, who was the head of General Dynamics, this major military-industrial complex firm. The Crown family were also big supporters of Israel's nuclear weapons program. You can't get away from it, Gene. Thanks for your call. I'll be talking to you. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to wrap up the JFK hour here pretty shortly. Gentlemen, we're going to wrap it up here talking about the JFK assassination, but I'm sure we'll talk about it much, much more in the future. one thing very interesting to point out, we mentioned the International Zionist Banking House of Lazard Brothers, and how they are apparently the bankers who control the Kennedy family fortune. It's also interesting to note that at the very time Jim Garrison started his investigation into the Kennedy assassination, the guy who was a Kennedy family lawyer was a guy who had been JFK's special liaison to the American Jewish community, Meyer Feldman. And, you know, it's interesting, even Bobby Kennedy said in a recorded reminiscences at the Kennedy Library in Boston, Bobby Kennedy said that Meyer Feldman's interest was often more concerned with the interests of Israel than with the United States. That's Bobby Kennedy said that. But yet, the Kennedy family financial affairs and their legal affairs were turned over to this guy, Meyer Feldman. And you know what? Meyer Feldman, at the time of the Garrison investigation, was actually connected with the very people in the Permindex network, the Bank de Credit International, Investors Overseas Services, all a Mossad web. So I have to think that perhaps the Kennedy family paid the price for to be able to keep their fortune by turning it over to the very people who were responsible for JFK's assassination. Very, very thought-provoking, very interesting. All right, well, we have one more caller. I'm going to bring him up, and I'm glad he called. It's Bob from Texas who got this whole thing going. I have a question for you, Bob.
Okay.
I looked that thing up on the Internet at hogturner.net/patsybuilding.html.
Right.
What is in that picture? It looks to me like you can see a frame of the Zapruder film above the building.
Oh, you mean the top picture?
Yeah, or the bottom picture.
The top? Well, the bottom picture is an actual photograph.
Right, but you know, in the air above the building, it says look beyond the window. What do you see when you look beyond the window?
What I see in that picture is a beautifully sunlit book depository 6th floor window, totally in the sunlight. And then right beyond that window, along the same trajectory, in the shadows, is the west face of the Dowtex building.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I want you to look in the sky, because I want to tell you, in the sky of that picture, it looks like you can actually see a frame from the Zapruder film. The outline of a frame. It's very interesting, but you're absolutely right. That Dowtex building was right there positioned.
That's why I call the book depository a patsy building. Oswald wasn't just a patsy. The whole building was a patsy to take the attention away, in my opinion, from the Dowtex building.
Well, you know, see, that's the thing. You know, when they set this up, they set it up very carefully. They covered all angles. And, you know, they tied in so many people in so many different ways that they tied people's hands.
Well, you know what? I don't see it that way. Because, in fact, I want to ask you a question real quick. I don't have time.
All right. Well, you call back on Monday. Why not?
Okay. Well, maybe. Okay, but thanks a lot for doing this.
All right. Appreciate it, Bob. You're my interlocutor.
Okay.
All right.
Goodbye.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're wrapping it up. Apologies to the callers we couldn't bring up, but you call back in on Monday night. This is Michael Collins Piper signing off. I hope you all have a good weekend. Take care. God bless.
Can we talk?
Can we talk?
Can we talk about gun control?
Gun control?
Seems like it should work, doesn't it?
It should work. You'd think so. Yeah.
Pass the right laws.
Pass the right laws.
And you can disarm the criminals.
You disarm them.
That's the idea.
But the problem is...
The problem?
Criminals don't obey the law.
They don't obey the law. That's true.
After all, they're criminals.
They're criminals. Criminals. They'll always find a way to get guns. No matter how many laws you pass.
Which means...
Which means they still have guns.
They still